Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Slimming Surgeon podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kandace Kichler. Today's guest, Morgan Housley, is one of my friends. She is a beautiful 28-year-old single blonde bombshell who was born in Canada, but she grew up in the Tampa Bay, Florida area. She went to the University of Toronto and then transferred to a small university in Boston and got her degree in political science. Morgan is currently in DC. We met each other in Florida and we have mutual friends, but she's currently in the DC, Virginia area, and she works as an executive assistant for a nonprofit think tank. So she has a lot of things she's going to talk to us about. She loves wellness. She loves health, fashion, running, tennis, soccer, cooking, like all the typical girly things that we all love. And we're just going to kind of talk today about life and all of the fun things. So welcome, Morgan.
Thank you for having me. Hi, guys.
Yay. So Morgan and I were kind of like just bouncing ideas off of each other over the past couple of weeks about what we want to talk about on this episode. So as I stated, Morgan's young. She's 28 and I'm older than that. We're not going to say my stated age, or we're not going to state my age. But we were talking about how like we're kind of in different generations, right?
Yeah.
Like
we
you're
were talking about it last night. I think I'm on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z.
Right. And I'm a millennial for sure. Right. Cause I'm like 1986. Okay. Oh my God. I just gave my age away. And then Morgan's obviously younger. So, we just have like different groups of friends, as in like, obviously you've got people that are your age that you hang out with, I have people that are my age that you hang out, but we both kind of connect on so many different levels and so many different values that we're kind of like bridging this gap. And so I thought it would be so important to talk about like the differences in people you are growing up around and with and versus me. And then just kind of get into a little bit of everyday stuff.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with kind of like dating in today's like world and landscape. I mean, when I started dating, there wasn't really social media, first of all. And then the second part is there were no dating apps. Like, what is it like as a girl today or a woman today trying to navigate this situation?
Yeah. For me personally, if I've used a dating app, I've used it for like one conversation and then that was it. Like I don't use the dating apps. But for dating in general, I was in a almost 2-year relationship in college and then that ended. And then really shortly after I got into a new relationship and that was through getting set up through a friend. Mm-hmm. And so, there was no dating app situation. It was just getting set up through friends. And then, I'm trying to think of after that, that breakup was really rough. And I met the next guy through Instagram.
Okay.
I feel like Instagram is like a common thing.
Right. I feel like people are meeting that way these days. Like they'll, I guess, somehow find someone through a connection and then DM them.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine was, he's in the same like line of work in like the political conservative social media space. And so that's how I met him, through Instagram. And then my most recent guy that I had been dating, no longer together, was through my friend, a good friend of mine. Okay. So yeah, I haven't met the guys that I've dated through
dating apps.
Dating apps. Yeah, it's been through social media or friends.
It's so interesting though, because like I have met people who met their significant other through a dating app and now they're like married with kids, like there are some cases like that. But in general, for me, like from what I observe, it's like you see men and women just swiping and not really treating the person on the other side as an actual human or like a real individual who you should be trying to consider whether or not you want to form a real connection with.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I think is like unique to my generation is even if you meet somebody through social media and it's not through a dating app, I think Instagram in general just breeds like you constantly have access to a bunch of really cute guys and a bunch of really cute girls. And I know a common problem with girls my age or maybe like 20s, 30s, 40s on is a wandering eye on social media. Like back in the day, if you were dating a guy, you didn't have social media. Like if you saw a pretty girl, you would be like, oh, she's pretty, and that's really it. But Instagram, there's like story likes now. You can like somebody's story, which is a form of flirting.
What?
Yeah, I guess it just depends. It's really situational, right? But like a girl can post a pretty thing and your boyfriend or like whoever you're dating could like or heart the story. And depending
Yeah.
on what the story is, that's like a form of like I see you kind
Uh-huh.
of thing. So it's interesting how there's like the social media side of loyalty and dating. Um, but yeah,
This
what
is
was your question
true.
again?
This is so true.
Yeah.
And I think it can complicate things, even for like someone like myself who's married, like, do I want my husband liking other women's photos? Like, to be honest, I don't care right now. Like, but I would probably care if it were something a little bit shady, like
Yeah.
if it weren't innocent and it was going a step further, like, yeah, you're right. This does lead to some complicated situations and conversations.
Yeah. And one thing that I've picked up on too is it's sad that you even have to look, but I've noticed that if you can see who the person's following on Instagram, it's really telling. Like there's some videos where you'll see if the guy is following and like as you're scrolling, you're seeing a bunch of like their profile pictures are thirst traps or they're like Instagram models. If I see that, I'm immediately like,
Yeah.
it's one thing if you see a pretty girl, but it's one thing when you're following like that
Mm-hmm.
many like thirst traps.
Yes.
That to me is a red flag. And that's something that like someone in their 30s or 40s or like isn't on social media isn't paying attention to.
Right. Or even thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one thing I do if I see a guy that I'm interested in. I have my own filters of like my non negotiables, but one general thing is like if they're following a bunch of thirst traps and Instagram models and stuff, that's like a
Yeah.
no go for me. I'm like, you're clearly not in a phase where you have like self control and you want to settle
Mm-hmm.
down.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I will say to some men's defense, my husband was probably not in a place of settling down until he met me. So you do have to give them that,
That's true too. That's true too. I love it.
Okay. So that is a really good like segue into what are your non-negotiables? Like, I want to know what a girl today is kind of like looking for. And I know you're not a typical girl because we're friends, but what are some of your other non-negotiables with dating?
Yeah, I think it's obviously super different than what I would have as an expectation for a friend. Like I feel really grounded in my core values and stuff, but with friends, I think there's a lot more wiggle room. Like if they don't have the same religious beliefs or if even the same political beliefs, like as a friend, no problem at all. I love it. But if you're looking at it through a relationship, I have a way more like specific, like my
Mm-hmm.
non-negotiables. And for me, it's Christian.
Yeah.
That is like one of my non-negotiables. I didn't grow up Christian. I am Christian now, and it's just personally become like the most important thing to me. And I could go on like a whole rabbit hole on that. Even like I've learned that you can just say it like, yeah, I'm Christian, and a lot of Christian girls will be like, oh, whoa, like he said he's Christian, like this is like amazing. And I think that some guys can kind of use it as like a checklist thing.
Yeah.
Like they say, do their actions really line up? Like, do they really love the Lord? And are they like pursuing a relationship with him? So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing I've learned in dating. That's been like a non-negotiable of mine. And I've met a guy that said, I'm Christian. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so I'm romanticizing that. And then I'm like, I come to find out he doesn't really love the Lord. And it's just something you say because it sounds good.
Right.
And if you're not there on the same belief system, that's totally fine. I think it's just like being honest,
Yeah.
So mine is Christian and conservative. That's where I fall on like the
Mm-hmm.
political things. And I think there's an umbrella of like values that go under that.
Right.
But first and foremost, Christian. And then really that's my only non-negotiable.
Okay. Okay. Well, we probably have some candidates in the room here. No, just kidding. Yeah, no, I think that that's also, similar things that I looked for. And I find it interesting when I see couples get together and then fall apart. And then you go back to these things. It's like, you didn't even have the same values. Like, why did you think that that was going to work out? Like, seems good at the time, seems like not a big deal at the time. But if you're trying to plan your life and potentially, have children together and do all of these things like for an eternity, you can't fundamentally have different principles.
Yeah. And you know what? Can I add to my answer?
Yeah.
Now that you responded, I think that I've learned in the dating scene that, to start, my first boyfriend in college was like an absolute angel. And the way that he was when we first met was exactly the same throughout the whole relationship. Like, it wasn't like he put on this facade of like flowers and like all these incredible things. Like, he was the same day one throughout the whole relationship. And in other relationships, I haven't had many, I've learned that like they'll put this front or like their best foot forward. I mean, we all kind of do in our own way, right? Like, it takes a while to see like the messy that we all have. But I've noticed that they'll do like all the things they know they should do throughout the entirety of their relationship, like leading and being like really intentional with dates and loyal and like super communicative and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I swear it's like around the 3-month mark or just whatever, that a switch is kind of flipped with guys that I've dated, where it's like, whoa, they kind of go into like taking you for granted and they've kind of got you hooked.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a trap that a lot of girls fall into. Is like, oh, well, like he was like this. And then you start dating that whole, like that person for the potential or like from what you saw in the beginning. And so that's a big lesson I've learned is like, are they leading? Are they emotionally available? Are they like pursuing you throughout the whole relationship? Like, that shouldn't be just like in the honeymoon phase. You should have that like intentionality the whole time.
Right.
So that's one thing I've learned. And I'm such a romantic. Like, I want marriage and babies so badly. And I think I've gotten caught up in wanting that so badly that like even when they change their tune or they stop doing all of those things, that it's like I hold on and it's like, no, they're not ready. That's fine. It's not personal. Just
right.
Raise my standards.
Well, at least you're holding to your standards. Like, I think that is so important because you don't want to get into a situation where you're going to then regret it later. Like, oh, now we have kids together, but this thing about him kind of bothers me and I don't want to be in this anymore. Like, that's not good. That's not good for you. It's not good for him or anyone else involved, including kids. I feel so sad for those people like that. Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to segue or I could talk about this topic forever. But one thing I've learned too was I had my most recent serious relationship was like over a year, and we had talked about engagement and stuff. And looking back now, like it was clearly he was not my person. But oh my gosh, what was I going to say? Oh, I looking back, I was treated so poorly, but I stayed anyway. Mm-hmm. For multiple reasons, a lack of confidence and just wanting the marriage and kids so badly. I don't know who said it, but it was like, if you had a daughter and your daughter was dating a person like the person that you're dating, what would you tell them?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so deep. I was like, oh my gosh, I would tell my daughter to run.
Yeah.
And to reach your standards and to wait. And like, that really shook it up for me. It's funny, like when the breakup happens, you should be focusing on all the things that were wrong and why it wasn't meant for you, but you flood your mind with the positive and all the good stuff. And that was a really good like shift back into reality of like what he was giving me at face value. Would I want my daughter with somebody like that? And that would immediately be like, okay, I'm done romanticizing this. Like,
yeah,
let's call me for someone else.
That's really, really, amazing advice, because I feel like so many people don't take that step back and look from the outside, because you're so caught up in the emotions and like the memories and the things that you've done together that maybe people want to hang on to something that's really not worth their time.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like this. They're probably listening, so we're not going to call them out.
I think as girls, it's like we're fixers and we want to like,
yes, 100%.
we want to see the best. And I think a date for potential is such a big problem for girls, no matter what age you're at. Like women, we want to nurture, we want to fix. And everybody's
Some people
broken.
don't want to be fixed. That's the problem.
That's
right.
the thing too, is like, and that's me saying like, I'm so broken and I have like stuff that I have to work on, but I have like an open heart to like growing for myself. And if they're not there, if they don't even understand they have issues, or if they're not even open like to growing, then you can't work with that.
No, you cannot.
And so I think
people will not change until they want to.
Yeah. And like, I think one last thing is like, men will show you how they feel about you. Like you can hear all the right words, but like the cliche, but true actions speak louder than words. And then my little extra note on that is you want to see those actions over a long period of time. Like you can see those actions for 3 months, but the real flex is like, is your man treating you properly a year down the road, 2 years down the road? Right.
Exactly.
So
love this. Okay. Okay,
so
good.
much.
No, I know it's really good. And like young or old, like we need to remember key things like this. Like I think it's so important if you want to maintain happiness in your relationship. But let's segue kind of your non-negotiables for relationships to non-negotiables in your career. Like what is a girl in her 20s looking for with a job? Because I feel like my generation and like the people that I grew up around, and I tend to relate more to people who are older than me. Like I've always been told I have like an older soul and I'm more mature than people my same exact age. But it's like, I was very grassroots, like very hardworking, you know, put the grit in and, you know, as you work hard, you will achieve success. But you may have to take some shit to get there. So like, what are people in your state like thinking about, and what are your non-negotiables? Because I know it's pretty different than how I came to be.
Yeah. You mean like in the state of Virginia or just like my
no, like in general, like in your like time.
Yeah. I feel like I've actually learned a lot from my friends. I feel like a lot of my really close friends that I've had for years have such a good balance of like, I made a note of it actually. They're so focused on themselves in the best way. And, they're trying to figure out what their passions are, wherever that leads. I have a friend that's a veterinarian. I have friends that are teachers. I have friends that are in their residencies for medicine. I have friends that do a really good job at like locking in and pursuing their passions, but also really wanting a marriage and kids someday. Mm-hmm. Like they're not like the like way over there, like boss babing too hard and like, I have no time for men. And like, this is all about like this. It's like, they're like, no, I want that someday. It's going to come at the right time. And I have these like passions and, goals with my career and my life that I want to do too. And the guy will come in and pursue at the right time. So, my mom's always taught me that, which I'm really grateful for. But I feel like this has been such a good reality check for me because in the last couple of months, I think I've gone on the other side of that where I'm like, I want marriage and kids. And, I would be focused on my career and my job so much. But then a guy would come along and I would be like kind of distracted.
Yeah.
Like, well, like I want to like lean into this. And it became too much about that person, A, way too early on, and B, in general, you want to have both. Mm-hmm. It's healthy for you and it's attractive to them that you have your own thing going on, your own passions and stuff. So I think, I've surrounded myself with friends that have a really good balance, and I'm learning too. Like you can want the marriage and the kids, but like really invest in yourself.
Yeah, I think you should invest in yourself too, 100%. But like I was kind of on that other end of the spectrum. Like, I mean, if you look at my life now, you would not think that, but like there was a time where people, once I got pregnant, were like, you wanted to have kids? Like we never pictured you having kids because you were so career focused and like goal oriented and didn't give anyone a time of day. Like I remember in medical school, I was dating this guy and he had like tickets to some event or something. And it was like, kind of a big deal at the time. And I was like, yeah, I'm just like not going to make it. Like I'm operating, I'm scrubbing. like, and I was a student. So like my presence really was not that important at the time, but like I way put work above relationships and above other people and above outside commitments. I mean, look now, and I've, kind of changed my career where I have such a better balance, and I'm so thankful for that. But I think it's important that women who do want to have a career who want to have a career and a family think about the planning situation, because you don't want to get, into your late 30s and into your early 40s and be like, damn, I missed that boat. Like now I can't have kids. And now I am having a really hard time finding a guy who isn't already divorced with kids, and things like that, which obviously there's always outliers, and obviously you can make a great situation out of pretty much anything, but it's a lot harder when you only focus on your career. So it's like really finding that balance is important, like you said.
Yeah. And I think like biologically, right? Like as women, we kind of almost have to have a little bit more thought with that. Like men can get women pregnant at a way older age. Right?
Yeah. Until they're in their 80s, like literally.
Yeah. So it's like our fertility window is pretty small,
very
right?
small, very small. Like don't get it twisted. Like people see, the stuff in the news and on social media today, and it's like, oh, so-and-so's 51 and she's having a baby. Like A, that's not healthy for anyone, not for the baby, not for the mom. And B, that's like a way outlier. Like that's not going to happen to you. I'm sorry. Like forget it. It's not. You need to try to have your babies like 20s and 30s. And I'm talking early 30s. Like this is reality.
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like women, if we hold these standards so tightly, men will have no choice. And obviously there's women that like need the work and stuff too. But if we like hold our standards high, then men will have to like get it together to win over a girl,
exactly.
In your 20s and 30s.
Exactly.
And so,
I feel really, I don't want to say I feel bad for it, but like I'm upset for some people who get in situations with men who take that for granted and who are like, oh, whatever, she froze her eggs, it'll be fine. Like, no, it won't be fine. And you don't know what it's like to go through a pregnancy in your late 30s and your early 40s, and have to do reproductive treatments and take injections every single day and like deal with the consequences and the side effects of all of these things. Like, it's not just something to be like, oh, let's go travel for a couple of years first, because a couple of years turns into 10 and then you can't get pregnant.
Yeah. And that's one thing I've learned too, is like, I think culture has tried to make women, I think it's changed over the last maybe like year or so.
Yeah. It's changing back. Like, thank God.
Yeah. But like back in like a couple of years ago, if you asked a woman, what do you want? And they're like, I want to be a mom with kids. Like, obviously there's so much more to want in life. Like I want to pursue my passions. I want to serve people, whatever. But that is such a normal thing to want. And I think it's a mix of wanting that and being intentional with like, your 20s and 30s are really like the ideal time to do that. And then trusting God that it's going to come at the right time. And then also pursuing your passions and your hobbies and building something for yourself in the meantime too. And even while you're with your person.
Right.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it does. And also like to add to that, to some people, it may be their passion and purpose to be a mom and to have children and to pour into those kids, and to create good people. So we shouldn't discount that. And that being something that is your goal shouldn't be a problem to me, you, or a man,
I think it's so beautiful. Like, same. Like I can't think of a more rewarding, requiring a lot of hard work. I mean, I'm sure, I wouldn't know, but, and yeah, I don't know. It's just the most like rewarding, most like, I don't know, God-given job, if that's what you can. Yeah.
100%. Okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously people would consider me like a boss babe and all these things, but I am a mom too. And that job is equally important, but actually like way more important than my job, because at the end of the day, like these are my kids. This is my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it.
So kind of talking about like your jobs have been kind of like focused around like politics and very, almost like polarized. Like you've worked for someone who like was very outspoken about their viewpoints. And I'm not sure what the exact situation you're in now is, if it's kind of similar, but how do you find that difficult? Because for me, like with what I do and like the platform that I have, it's hard for me to you really like state my exact opinion and my exact feelings, because I do care about other people and I don't mind that they have different opinions. And it's like, I don't want to turn someone off because of that. Like, how has it been, holding the positions that you've had?
Yeah, it's interesting because my degree was in political science, and the jobs that I've taken as an executive assistant are for political organizations or companies, or that have like a political thread to them. That but I'm not directly like in the trenches with all of it. I'm just their assistant, so I'm doing more of like the administrative role. But I've always had like the value of it for me was helping somebody that is aligned with how I fall politically, or just generally. So what was your question? Did I like,
is that hard? Like having these positions within, maybe let's say you're in Washington and you're working for so-and-so X, but then you come across so-and-so Y, who's on the complete opposite end. Like, is there tension there? Like, how is it in reality? Because what I perceive from social media and from the news and from the media is like, you guys don't even talk. That's like, you're not friends with people on the other side. Like, how is that?
I feel like I've experienced more of this in college than I have with my job. I'm not on the Hill. I work for like the nonprofit is kind of, it is political work, but I'm his assistant. So I'm never on the Hill, like talking to people on all sides of the spectrum, or all ends of the spectrum. But in college, when I went to University of Toronto, my family wasn't even political. I didn't grow up in a political family. We're originally Canadian. So they were like, we're moderate. We can't really vote anyway. And so I had no like bias going into college. Like I really didn't even know much about what made you fall more left or more right. And a lot of my friends were really liberal. And even when I became more conservative, when I went to my school in Boston, all of my friends were really liberal. I never saw it as a problem. I don't think I was really vocal then. I knew where I fell. Like by that point, I had been baptized and I found the Lord and I was Christian, and then became like much more conservative. But with my friends, like we didn't talk about it. Or they did, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I found in situations that I really could care less. I found it really interesting. Like I love in terms of friends, like if you see like through a different religious lens or political lens, totally fine with me. But I found that when I would vocalize how I felt, that it was a problem for them.
That's so frustrating, because you're sitting here discussing how like you don't mind if people have a differing opinion of you and it doesn't bother you, but it's like the opposite can't be true. And that's so sad. Like I feel like that is one of the problems that we have in today's like culture, is that people are so polarized, and it's like not even allowing the other person to state their views before bashing them or judging them or disagreeing with them just from the get-go. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I loved it because it broadened my perspective and it helped strengthen what I believed. And I think back in the day, like you could agree to disagree, and that was totally fine. It's almost like now, if you don't end up with one of them changing their minds, then it's just an explosive conversation. Right. Like back in the day, you could kind of like do a little jab or like even vocalize how you felt, and you could like shake hands or be like, I still love you.
Yeah.
Like, we're good. And I've always wanted to be that way, but I've found like personally with friends, it's like 1 minute I'm like an angel and the nicest person they've ever met, and the second I like see something differently, then I'm like like the spawn of Satan. I'm like, okay, like,
which is like so funny. Like it's like, no, actually so not.
Yeah, I'm like, no. And I think I have learned too, like when I first got into the political stuff, I think I got caught up in the polarization stuff, like the low blows, the jabs. It's like left versus right. And I've learned now too, where it's like the ultimate goal is for us to like find common ground. And I do want to vocalize the beliefs that I have and I hold so strongly to, but I also have like a really open mind and heart. And I want to communicate it in such a way that is like so graceful, but still so honest, you know? I think delivery is really big too. And I think people that fall more conservative like me, some people that I know, like publicly, you know, they'll communicate their opinion in such a way where it's like, you're not going to get anybody to understand where we're coming from if you do it in such a like
harsh way.
Yeah,
exactly. I know. I feel the same way. Like most people are actually more moderate than you think. It's like, you know, I can say I'm a conservative, I can say I'm a liberal, like whatever. But at the end of the day, probably both of us have open minds and could see the other side. And it's just frustrating because it's really hard having conversations with people who can't listen.
Yeah. And I think like a good way to end it too is like, we have so much more in common than we think than like powers at bay or our leaders want us to think. Like you said, a lot of people really fall in the center, or even if they have an opinion, like there's so much that binds us together no matter where you fall. And so I always try to remember that. And not in a way that I'm compromising my beliefs, but it's like I think, yeah, the powers at bay want us to be so far apart from each other, but like there's a lot that unifies us too. So
I know. And one thing that like we also don't realize is like, we never had access to all the information that we have today. So like, you know, 15 years ago, if you came across your friend, you know, at Starbucks or something, you didn't know where they fell on so many different aspects, but social media lends itself to allow you to kind of get some glimpse into other people's minds, whether or not they think you're listening or not. So like, for example, I have a good friend who I love and I think she's amazing and she thinks differently than me on many different topics. And I have caught myself being like, what? Like she really thinks that? Like that is awful, you know, about certain things. And it made me almost dislike her for a moment. And then I have to take a step back and be like, okay, this is not a big deal. This is not something that's going to come between me and this person who I've been friends with for, 5-10 years. Over one little story she posted on Instagram. Like that's ridiculous. And I think that a lot of us get caught up in stuff like that. Like we see a little post or, I had someone else complain to a friend, I saw that slimming surgeon liked this post by somebody else. I can't believe she would be like that. And it's like, first of all, I don't even know what I'm liking half the time. Like I'm in like zombie land. I'm just scrolling, like I'll double click whatever like looks pretty without even reading the caption half the time. So like for someone to take it to that step and think like I'm aligned with so-and-so and their views on X, Y, and Z just because I liked a picture on Instagram, like we gotta get back to reality here, people.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing too, I've learned even with like relationships and stuff. And I think honestly, a lot of it is like through my faith is like, God gives me so much grace every day. Like I fall short so much and I need his grace all the time. And so I try to think of it the same way. I'm like, maybe if it's like they're operating like off of something like their upbringing or what like they like think to be true. And I'm like, I don't agree with it at all, but it's not personal.
Exactly. You know? Right. It's not an attack at you.
Yeah. It's not like right at me. Like that story was for me. It's like, no, I don't agree with it, but it's not like, it's not that deep. It's
exactly. Exactly.
So I think that helps take like the intensity out of it.
Totally. Yeah. So kind of like talking about intensity, we talked briefly when we were kind of hashing this podcast out about like, when we have intense emotions like towards others, like I explained to you how like sometimes if I catch myself like feeling jealous or feeling like intimidated by someone else, like how I navigate that situation. Like what were your thoughts when we were talking about that?
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like I'm just going to talk about it, I guess, through the lens of political stuff too. The first political event I went to in Tampa, I was like fresh out of college, and I think I found myself looking at what everybody was wearing and what bag they had, or like how put together they looked. And as a girl, I think we naturally gravitate to those things, like how they look. But I think that it's really helped me to like snap myself back into center and to be like, okay, well, first of all, like confident in like who I am and where I'm at right now, to the point where I can like look at them and be like, oh my gosh, they look gorgeous, in like a healthy way of like admiring them. And maybe being motivated, like, wow, they look great. Like I want to dress like that, or like they can afford that bag. Like I love that bag. Like I'd love to work hard for it, and not seeing it as like them against me in this like big comparison game. And also it was a good reality check for me of like, why am I in that room? Like we're here to talk about like a really important cause or a really important subject. And it is really so easy to get caught up in that as a girl, of like the aesthetics and how everything looks. And it's like, okay, like what's really important here? And obviously I want to look confident and dress well and, you know, have a cute bag for
all
myself.
the things, right?
Yeah, I want all those things. I'm here for it. But I think it's like a good mix of admiring it and not getting jealous, and then really focusing on why I was in those rooms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. No, that's exactly kind of where I wanted you to take that, because we all, you know, I find myself, if I'm ever like scrolling or, you know, at an event and I, you know, feel some type of way about someone, I think to myself, like, why am I feeling this way? Like, why, what in me am I possibly insecure or uneasy about that's making me not like something about this other person? Like, it's never about you. When someone else is judging you or hating on you or, you know, saying negative things about you, 99% of the time, it's actually about them. You know, like they've got an issue with themselves, and I try to find grace with those people, you know, like or with myself. Like I try to check myself and say, you know, this is not a healthy way to look at this situation. Like they're doing amazing. Be happy for them. And I wish that more people would think like that.
Yeah, I've learned that a lot too. I guess through like a relationship lens. There was one of the guys that I'd mentioned that I'd previously dated. I don't think externally I'd ever looked skinnier. My hair had never looked better. I'd never been prettier. But because of the dynamic in the relationship and how he was treating me, I felt like garbage. I felt like a ghost. I felt like so worthless. And I had no self-worth. And like that puts you in a bad situation in a relationship, because if you love that person more than you, it's scary.
Yeah.
Like I really love him more than I loved me. And I look back now and I'm like, wow, I was like so tiny. I looked gorgeous, but I literally felt like absolute garbage. And I felt like, I just like went to such a low, because of my lack of confidence too. And so, yeah, like when I feel, also with girls, like the time of the month, if you're in that time of the month where you're bloated, you're like bloated. I'm like, I loved how I looked 2 weeks ago. I think like social media has been good in that sense, is like, I think we're now gravitating towards people that are so much more transparent.
Yeah.
Of like, the weeks where I feel so snatched and I feel great. My skin's good. I'm having a good skin day. And there's like those other weeks where I feel gross, or I've kind of let the gym go on the wayside.
Right.
Giving yourself grace too.
Totally. Within measure though, because I'm also like not about, and I'm just going to say it, I'm not about like this like overindulgent body positivity moment where it's like, you know, it's okay to just be completely unhealthy. Like that's the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like, yeah, we do have days where we have breakouts and we do have days where we don't feel up to go to the gym. But like at the end of the day, you also don't want to be a slob, like, cause you're not going to feel good from the inside out if you let yourself go that way either.
Yes. And then this is so random too. I was at a Christmas market in DC and they had old 50s and 60s ads. And it was like the girls like with like the perfect hair and the makeup and stuff. And I'm like, you're right. It's such a fine line. Like it is so good to aspire to looking your best and feeling your best, and like having integrity with like how you take care of yourself and the outfits you wear to work. It's paying an homage to your job or to a room that you're in. And that is like totally okay.
Right.
But like you said, if you go way too far, it's superficial. But then if you go on the other side, like where was the self-discipline? Like, especially for guys, hit the gym, girl. Like if you don't feel like going, like sometimes like push yourself. It's so situational. But yeah, like you said, there's that really fine line of like,
I know.
I don't know.
I mean, for me, like taking care of yourself just shows like a self-respect, you know, and I've always felt like if you can't take care of yourself and like look your best when you need to, obviously not every day. I don't wake up with my makeup done. But if you can't take care of yourself, like what are you projecting to other people? Like if I don't even care about myself, how am I going to tell my patients that I care about them, and like my family that I care about them? It's got to start from within.
Yeah. And even when I was going through like the worst parts of my breakup, I'm weird. I love running, and like going to the gym and running has never been like hard for me to do. But when I was in the funk, I didn't want to go to the gym. And I literally had to put it in that like through that lens, because it's true. I'm like, if I make this choice to go to the gym, that's a form of self-love. Like I'm choosing to take care of me and to choose me instead of being so sad about this breakup. So yeah, it is true. It is a form of like self-love and investing in yourself and taking care of yourself.
100%. Okay. We have only a couple more minutes left. So I want to just talk about one other thing that you mentioned yesterday that I thought was so profound. And it was how you talked about the 3 different types of people that we should like surround ourselves with. Will you talk about that for us?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember where I heard it from. I think it was through some podcast, some Christian podcast I listened to that. And even if you're not Christian, I feel like this applies to literally everyone.
Yeah. I said it in the OR today. Like, and I don't, everyone has different backgrounds, but they were like, love that. So good. So tell us.
Okay. So if it's what I'm thinking that we were talking about, is that you ideally want people that are ahead of you in life, like they're in a different phase. Like for instance, for me, I'm single. So ideally I would want someone like you who's married with kids, or a couple that's newly engaged or newly married that like I can look to for advice and for wisdom. For me, like as being a Christian, ideally like a couple that loves the Lord and sees things through that lens. But in general, a couple that, yeah, is married, engaged, has kids, someone that's ahead of you. And then also having somebody that's kind of behind you in life, like someone in high school or someone struggling in college that like I can pour into. That way it's like incredible that I'm getting poured into by people that are ahead of me with like wisdom and hope and just like good advice. And then also somewhere where I'm like giving back, where like I have stuff that I've learned, that I've grown in, that I wish I would have had when I was in high school and college. And so then you're giving that to somebody else. So I love that. And that's been what I've been trying to find now is like, yeah, a good mentor for like the ahead, and then somebody that I can help. That's
exactly. And I think that the third aspect to that is like, you want to like surround the people that are maybe at your same level, like maybe, in the same court as you,
yes,
who are positive and who are, encouraging you in the right ways. Like I have friends who are no longer really close friends that while we were at the same level, maybe academically or, career wise, or maybe the same level in their relationship, our values just didn't align. And I didn't feel like I was coming out of those conversations or those, meetings happy. It was like daunting, or I felt like really negative afterwards. Like, oh my God, all that happened there was we talked shit about somebody else. Like that is not what I want in my life now or in the future. So like, just as important as it is to look forward to what you want and to be and surround yourself with people who are at maybe a stage ahead of you, and to give back to people behind you or not quite where you are yet. It's important that the people around you every single day that are in the trenches with you are people who are more aligned with your goals and positive people for you.
Yeah. So sorry. I only mentioned the 2.
No, that's good.
Sorry. The third one that's really important too is like, it's so easy. I feel like the enemy wants you to feel so alone in what you're going through. And like literally the lie will be no one can understand exactly what you're going through. But yeah, if you have people in your corner, like you said, who are walking through a really similar season, that can like add value to your life and support you and be genuinely happy when you're doing well, and there to tell you what like you need to hear and not what you want to hear when you're going through stuff. That's another big thing too, is I don't know if I come off like really soft and sensitive or something, but it's so funny. Like my mom is so candid and like really like tough personality and like shoots straight. And I love friends like that. Like I would rather you tell me straight up, like what I need to hear and rather than what I wanted to hear.
Exactly. And, it means you really care about that person, like if you're willing to make them upset by saying some constructive criticism, then you really care for them.
Yeah.
I tell my husband this.
And then what did you say? Like people that you like a relationship, like friends that I feel like my best total, like I feel like I'm completely myself. If you have to like filter yourself for a relationship, no go. If you have to filter yourself for friends, no go. Like you should
Exactly.
feel like I love what is it like the phrase? Like I want to be able to show up to like my friend's house in PJs, like no makeup and just like come undone, and friends that are like really in my corner and want to see me happy. And yeah, I guess with girls, like even when you're in your, I've learned even when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, that jealousy is still there. There's still friends that are kind of like they're your friends, but they secretly like won't celebrate your wins. And it's like if you pick up on that, then
leave,
like
run,
then leave,
block.
run. Exactly, done. I love it. And
I love it.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm sure you're the exact same. Like when you give so much to relationships, sometimes you attract people that are kind of more like takers.
Yes.
Or they'll take advantage of it. So I think and my mom told me this. She's like, I raised you girls to be so caring and loving, but you do really need to learn like where your boundaries are, and people earn like a certain level of access to you. And you need to like even evaluate your friendships. Like, are they giving me the same kind of love that I'm giving them?
Exactly.
And if not, like you said, done.
Don't be friends with just the takers.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. Well, I feel like we went through a lot. We gave a lot of advice. I think we hashed out a couple things, and I think it's really obvious to everybody, you know, like where we stand, like with our faith and like how important that is. And I think that that's a good guiding light for everybody if you've been disconnected lately to maybe reconnect, because it will help you immensely. Is there anything else you want to add, or where do you want people to find you if they want to send you a message or connect with you?
I use Instagram first and foremost.
Samesies.
Yeah, I love Instagram so much. So it's Morgan Housley, Housley. And then, what did you say? Like one thing I wanted, like
any advice or anything else you want to add?
I mean, like, I know we've talked about it through the whole podcast that like God has just changed my life so much. And I know what it's like to not know the Lord, and, to have no idea what it is to put a faith in something bigger than yourself. And, my best friend invited me to church like 6 or 7 times, and I finally went, and it's just changed my life. The grace I've received from him, and like, obviously, like when you come to know the Lord, you're not perfect. Like, if anything, you realize how flawed you are and how much you want to like lean on him and get wisdom from him and like learn from him. So I just feel like that's been the biggest thing for me. It's helped me love myself more, like seeing myself through like how he sees me. Like he's my heavenly father. Like he loves me so much. And there's overwhelming grace, but there's so much like instruction and correction that you would want from like your father. So yeah, it's just changed how I've seen myself and how I've like seen my friendships and relationships in my family. So that's really it for me.
I love it. Thank you so much, Morgan. Thank you for coming on. I hope everybody enjoyed our little chat today, and follow Morgan. Send me a DM if you have any additional questions or want to like go into this deeper, but then also selfishly, please leave me a 5-star review.
Love you so much. I could talk to you forever.
I know. Love you, girl. All right. Well, we got to connect again when you're in Florida.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Bye.